Hello, viewers. Welcome to another episode of the Niger Development Podcast Show, a show where everything we discuss here is just about Nigeria and Nigeria's development. So, with me on the show today are two wonderful young men who you have seen on this show before. Dr. Chris Chikere, who lives here in the United Kingdom, and Barrister Engineer as well, who live here in the United Kingdom as well. Both of them are professionals in their respective field. So today we're going to discuss another wonderful topic, following things that have happened recently in Nigeria and overseas. People are beginning to question who we are as a people. So the topic for today is Nigeria still the giant of Africa? You know, we used to be the giant of Africa in the past. I don't know if we're still today, but if you look at the events such as the embassy attack in Indonesia just yesterday by Nigerians, the demolition of Nigeria's High Commission in Ghana, the xenophobic attacks in South Africa last year, the consistent and continuous slavery of Nigerians in Libya and other parts of the Middle East, and even the listing of Nigeria as a terrorist country by the President of the United States. So, you know, people are now beginning to question if we are still who we used to be. So, is Nigeria still the giant of Africa? So, gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Yeah, so I'm going to start off with you, Dr. Chris Chikere. Is Nigeria still the giant of Africa?
Thank you, AK, for that question. I would start this way. I would turn the question: was Nigeria ever the giant of Africa?
That was going to be a question, actually. Anyway, go ahead.
So, but anyway, I would still take it that Nigeria used to be the giant of Africa, and I would look at it based on population and the capacity of the economy, the Nigerian economy. So we are still the giant of Africa, but there are other things that have made our country seem as if we no longer we are no longer who we used to be. And maybe in the course of our discussions, we'll delve into those things that may have made us look like we are no longer the giant we used to think we were.
Okay, Barrister, do you actually believe that Nigeria is no longer the giant of Africa?
Well, you see, the question there, it's I would say is relative, because a giant on its own, it's something that is big. Okay, now something that is bigger than normal, bigger in size. So is Nigeria still a giant? Yes, we are still big. We still have almost 200 million population. We are still about the seventh most populous nation in the world. We are the most populous black nation. Now, what the question would be, I would look at it from, why was Nigeria referred to as a giant? You know, so it takes us back to when we where we had the best universities in Africa, we had the best military power, because what comes from being a giant, what comes from having a big population, it's the advantages you derive from it, like your military power, your human resources, the economy, the market, and all that. We still have all that, but are they functioning, or are they backward? Now, when we look at it from that angle, Nigeria is still a giant, but it could be what we could refer to as a sleeping giant. Okay. Now, so if you remember, we had ECOMOG when we had the best military. We were going on missions, getting respect from the Western military people. You know, Nigeria was receiving a lot of accolade about their military effort. But now we don't have that. Our military can't even, hold Boko Haram in Nigeria. Okay. Now, when you talk about our universities, it's all our education system has been run down. Our health system has been run down. I remember, I mean, we're not very young. I remember we had Indian teachers in my school and all that, and we had people from other countries, other parts of the world used to come to Nigeria to work. So at that point, we could say we were really, the giant of Africa. But in the when you look at things that are happening now, one very big example is BRISC, which is this association of Brazil, Russia, India, China,
Yeah, you're talking
and
about the
South
break.
Africa. Yeah. Now, this is an association of all the biggest population in all parts of the world. Russia in Europe, Brazil in their own right, China, India. These are big. The criteria to belong to that is that you have the biggest population in your area. So you are a newly developing market. You're a leading developing country and all that. Now in Africa, Nigeria, by our position, should have been the country representing Africa in that organization. But South Africa was chosen. That tells you that we have, turned from a strong giant to a sleeping giant. So if and that goes to, there's a saying in my village in Igbo which says which is when a lion or a tiger has a broken leg, a leopard or an antelope can
A
come
goat can even,
very
yeah.
close. Even a goat can challenge. So there's no way that some people will wake up in Ghana, go to the Nigerian High Commission and destroy it. If they had in like 20 years ago, they wouldn't have done that. 30 years ago, they wouldn't have done that because Ghana was feeding from Nigeria.
So,
So
I'm going to cut you. I'm going to get back to you, Chris. Dr. Chris, you mentioned earlier on that you said, was Nigeria ever the giant of Africa? So, can you throw more light on that? Was Nigeria ever the giant of Africa?
Well, I would say this. The reason why I asked that question is I grew up I did not grow up completely in Nigeria. I went to primary and secondary school out of Nigeria, and it was in another African country. Then I knew that people from this country would go to Nigeria to study, to go to university. But then you saw also this massive population of Nigerians living in this country. And they were the petty traders. I don't know if you remember the days when Ghanaians were in Nigeria, where they were shoe cobblers, they were the people who do the menial jobs in Nigeria. This was also what was happening then when I was a young man in some part of Africa where you had Nigerians there doing those very menial jobs. So the people in these countries were looking at us as the way we looked at Ghanaians some years back. So at this point, as a young person or as a young man growing up, when somebody would say Nigeria is a giant of Africa, I did not say it because I saw Nigerians being treated like we treated Ghanaians those days. But then if you look at Nigeria as a nation, you would, like Eya said, we are a giant. We have that capacity. We have the population, we have the market. So, but what has actually happened? you talked about, AK, you talked about South Africa. The reason why South Africans would go after foreigners, and mostly Nigerians, is because they see them there in South Africa. And they don't see them as the professionals who came in there to work. And they see them as those guys who hang on the streets and sell drugs. That's how the South Africans see most of the Nigerians. And I don't say all Nigerians, because they have Nigerians who are
professionals out there as well.
Yes. The same thing is happening in Ghana today. If you meet Ghanaians, they will tell you the Nigerians are the people committing crimes in Ghana. So that makes it hard for you to defend that notion that you're the giant, because your people are actually going into poorer African countries and being seen as criminals there. I mean, there are Nigerians in Niger Republic. There are Nigerians in Burkina Faso. There are Nigerians. I mean, in countries where, in countries where you would expect, like we go to, like a lot of Nigerians when South Africa opened up, a lot of Nigerians moved to South Africa with the intention that, you know, some people in South Africa would say they are living in the West. Why so? Because we have not done the work to call ourselves the giant of Africa.
Can you just jump in there?
Yeah, you see, I totally see the point you're making, but I also want us to go back a little and look at it from this other perspective, okay? Some countries, and I'll say Nigeria is one of those countries, who have a traveling population, okay? Now, we're quite a number. We're more, about 200 million, okay? Now, so if, let's take Ghana. I don't know how many was the population of Ghana, but let's say Ghana is 60 million, which I don't think they would be up to, okay? And you are talking of a country of 200 million people. So if 5 people from Ghana live in Nigeria, and you want to balance that, you will need 15 people from Nigeria to go to Ghana. Now, when you say Nigerians are washing plates in Ghana, Nigerians are on the streets in Ghana, for every 5 Nigerians in Ghana on the streets, there's about 4 in the universities as lecturers. There are 4 other Nigerians in the hospitals as doctors.
Yeah,
why would Nigerian professionals leave Nigeria? We said we are the giant. We claim to be the giant. So why would Nigerian professionals? We have so many universities in Nigeria at the moment. Why would a Nigerian professional leave Nigeria to go to Ghana to lecture? Is it because of extra pay, or what is it?
Now, this is it, and I agree totally with what you're saying. You see, it's just like what is happening today in the US. We have a massive population of Nigerians in the US who are doing very, very well. Now, the problem is just this, that the very tiny group of Nigerians who get into crimes are the people
that ones that they get noticed,
that they amplify, and that is the world for you. It happens. For example, with the Islamic world, a minute group of people who are fundamentalists.
Yeah, Anthony Joshua is an example. You know, yes. Anthony Joshua is Nigerian.
But then the point I'm making is this: for a giant, for example, the Americans who've committed crimes abroad, but there's no way you wouldn't say or you would say Americans are criminals. But it's easily said in other countries that Nigerians are criminals. And the reason is just because we have not used that tag of Giant of Africa the way we were supposed to be using it. Because of bad leadership in our country.
You're very correct.
In a country where we have the sort of capacity we have, and we are still struggling to do the least of the things. I mean, when I say the least of the things, it's like you go into an airport in Nigeria. The toilet is not flushing. I mean, in an international airport. Now, what you would say, well, these things, you can see these things anywhere because
I have to correct you here. They are renovating the airport. Abuja International Airport is first class now. Can compete with
no, it's not. It's not first class. Except you have not traveled before. Except you have not traveled before. If the only place you've gone in, and I'm not talking about the West now. If you're talking about airports, there is no airport in Nigeria. There is none in Nigeria for what we have as a country. If the entry airport in Nigeria, and I would say the likes of the Abuja airports or the likes of the Lagos airport, if we say they are the major entries in Nigeria, then what you see in these airports, I mean, it's nothing to write home about.
They've been I mean, the Abuja airport has been recently upgraded to an international standard. That's what I mean.
That's just.
Is it up to the Aberdeen airport? You live in Aberdeen.
Yeah, no, it's much better than the Aberdeen.
No,
I mean, it's a proper,
I agree.
It's a proper international airport at the moment. I was there. I traveled there in January. I traveled through there in January this year. So I know.
Okay, so, but again, let's just look at some of the things you talked about. Why some countries look at us the way they look at us. An example is the problem in Ghana, where a building was demolished. If you look at what may have happened, for some of us who live in the UK, I mean, from the Ghanaian side of the story, they are telling us that that building is actually not a building of the embassy. It was a Nigerian businessman using the Nigerian consular as a cover to build a business property. And the people, the owners of that land, they actually have been discussing with that individual who was building that thing, and the person was using the Nigerian embassy as a cover. Check Premium Times in Nigeria, they have the story. The same thing we see here in the United Kingdom. In London, if you've gone into the Nigerian embassy in London, you see you have what they call an IT shop being run by the wife or the husband of somebody who works in the embassy.
A photocopying center.
Yes.
Center, yeah.
Run by somebody who works at the embassy. Then you go to the other end, you see somebody selling rice and beans inside the Nigerian embassy, being the wife of somebody who works in the embassy. So you have these things where people run businesses within the Nigerian embassy or within the Nigerian consulate and being, with that cover of a foreign mission, which is not supposed to happen. So when foreigners or when these people come into your embassy and see these things, they will treat you according to what they see. You go into these embassies, for example, in London, it's just that they've made some changes recently, but you go into this embassy, you see Nigerians sitting there crowded, and I mean the place is crowded, people are shouting, and you're asking yourself, don't this embassy have a way of giving people appointments? But they will give you appointments and it doesn't work.
The last time I was there, I had to ask them, because I said, You cannot give me an appointment for 9 o'clock and I get here by 9 o'clock. And then everybody is asked to sit down. So why did you give me 9 o'clock appointment? I could have as well come by 12. Because they just, the normal way of appointment in Nigeria, everybody come. Then you come at our level, we start queuing. I mean, I should arrive at the venue 10 minutes to my appointment, and knowing that at 9 o'clock somebody's going to attend to me. So, so you're telling me to come and sit down by 9 o'clock. So you're very correct.
So
even
anyway, and that is the picture the guy in Ghana sees. That is the picture the guy in South Africa sees. That is the picture the guy in the US sees. That is the picture the guy in the United Kingdom sees. And once they start treating you with what I mean, because the embassies are a representation of the government, and when they see that chaos, an embassy that is that chaotic, why wouldn't they treat a Nigerian anyhow? So when you turn around and say, I'm the giant of Africa, you don't see it.
My takeaway from it, it's I'm looking at the reaction, because I believe in whatever happens creates a reaction, and it could become a chain. Now, this goes back to our government, the High Commissioner, the President, the Foreign Affairs Minister. Now, if this situation is not treated with the force it requires, with the full diplomacy it requires, it means that this will repeat itself in Egypt. It will repeat itself in Kenya. It will happen in Mali, because people are watching. These countries are watching. Maybe, I don't know if you remember, a few months ago, the case is still ongoing now. There's the Nigerian High Commission, that building. There's a company that wants to attach it. Nigeria is owing them for a business they did, and they are trying to attach.
Is that in Nigeria? Is that in UK or in Ghana?
UK.
Okay.
Check it out in Google. You see, because my colleague in London, they were handling the brief. So that company is trying to attach that, as a debt. So and these countries watch you. If you look at here, as we are in this UK, when people ask you where you from, and you say Nigeria, there's a reaction.
There's a body language, yeah.
A different reaction when somebody says I'm from Kenya.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I know the embarrassment sometimes will go through. I used to work in a bank with Royal Bank of Scotland in Greenock in Glasgow. When I was doing my training, somebody came to give us training on fraud, and they were calling it Nigerian scam. The training, the topic for that training was Nigerian scam, and I was seated in that class as a Nigerian. You can imagine the embarrassment. So I think the president, I don't know how they've handled it. They may have handled it behind closed doors, but I think this will be a good opportunity to send a message to Ghana. Okay, Yes, the foreign office may have messed around. They may have allowed private individual to use them for business, to mess it up and all that. That is something we should take care of in-house. But presentation, it's everything in diplomacy.
But
Nobody, yeah,
do you think, and sorry to cut you,
yeah.
do you think that you know, reacting every time something happens, our government reacts. Every time something happens, we react. Is it not possible? And we spoke about this some time ago. We're talking about, we always try to deal with symptoms, leaving the problem. If you have a bacterial infection, you would have fever. Sometimes you have fever, you have other symptoms. If the fact that you're taking paracetamol to bring down the temperature doesn't stop the bacteria from doing whatever it's doing in your body. You have to take an antibiotic.
But not taking paracetamol at all makes it worse.
No. Well, yes. I mean, the symptom. The thing is dealing with the symptom. If you want to deal, you know, for us to come to a point where, you know, these things will curtail some of these things because you cannot stop it. You know, that you have to really clean up in-house before it would stop. You know, we have to start by cleaning in-house. Again, that's the more reason why I'm saying. Go ahead, AK.
Can I come in here? Just to, you know, add some flesh to what you said. I used to work in a company I used to work for before in the UK. Yeah, we had this HSE training, you know, health and safety training. And I think that's one of the most embarrassing moments I've seen in life. We were two Nigerians in that HSC training, and we were brought out to, you know, to demonstrate how to cross a road or something, how to show how to. The guy was trying to demonstrate something on safety, you know, safety awareness, and he brought two of us out, and he said, and he was telling us to cross a road, and in the process he said that, you know, you guys are Nigerians. I've been there. In Nigeria, you don't look right or you don't look left, you just jump into the road. You know, I went and met him after, said, I think, why would you use us for that kind of?
Yeah.
You know, why would you use us for that kind of?
It's not as if he's lying.
He's not
sometimes
lying.
Sometimes we are over patriotic to the extent that when people make such comments, we try to defend ourselves. We try to say, well, no, this has happened with a group of Nigerians where when we came and did our first masters in Aberdeen, we were walking with a group of Nigerians and we're talking about the roads in Nigeria. And the guy asked me a question: Have you been to Abuja? Have you seen the roads in Abuja? And I said, well, yeah, that would be, they have good roads. Why are you saying that? And he said, I mean, if you've been to Abuja and you've seen the roads in Abuja, why are you talking about bad roads? I said, where we are in Aberdeen, Aberdeen is not the capital of Scotland, not to even talk about the United Kingdom. And the roads here are good. Or if you go to the airport is good. So we have this thing where we try to defend ourselves whilst leaving the things back home to rot.
Yeah, but you see,
the truth of the matter, Nigerian, in home, in your house. I'll just take this as an analogy, and you can take it anywhere. If you don't dress well from your house and you're going out, maybe one or two of your buttons off your shirt, you know, are off. The person outside would see those buttons and would tell you your buttons are not, you know, your shirt is not buttoned well. You don't start saying, oh, you know, I mean, you say, okay, thank you, and you do it. So we have to
can I just now, because we have 10 minutes to go. We have 10 minutes to go. So, Dr. Barrister Engineer, what do you think? You know, because we need to get to the solutions before we close. So, what do you think? What brought us to this level where we are? We used to have good universities. We used to be respected in Africa. You know, it got to a point whereby the president of one of the countries in Africa, they were using us to demonstrate, you know, corruption and things like that in a speech. So, what brought us to this extent, this low level where we are no longer regarded properly or in Africa and in other parts of the world? We are being enslaved in Libya. We are used as slaves in Libya and in the Middle East.
Yeah. If you remember, during the last discussion we were having, Chris raised some issues, and I agree with him. We lost it. We lost quite a lot of what we should have been. We lost our growth when the military, for the long time, the military was in charge in Nigeria. We lost quite, you know, that, you know, it's just like a child that is growing, and at some point you stop that child from growing, and then the child, after about 20 or 30 years, you want that child to start growing again, and the child is at his 30th birthday, but then he left off at maybe 10 years.
Yeah, but
Okay,
we have a democracy now. We've had democracy since
yeah,
since some time now, since 1999. So why have we not still got it? Well, right. Why are we no longer feared in Africa and in the world?
It's not development. Is not what you do overnight. Now, but the only problem I have is, are we laying those foundations? So we have to go back to the drawing, to where we stopped, okay, and begin to put things in line again and move. We can do that. But the problem seems to be that we want this now, okay? We want electricity now. So every effort the government is doing is to give electricity now, okay? Short term. What about, I understand that the problem with our electricity is I think is distribution. So whatever they generate, even if they like, they can generate 1 million megawatts. What we have, the capacity we have, is less than 8,000 distribution. It cannot, more than 8,000 cannot pass through the national grid. Now, so why don't we go back and build a new grid?
Remember, we had Vision 2020 in Nigeria. We've had all these visions. We had all these long-term visions. What happened to them?
Leave about all those visions, because vision is as good as the people who bring them up. We've not had a vision for the country in reality. We've had good paperwork. Our budget, good economist people will tell you that our budget in paper is superb. It can run America, okay, in paper. But what is the implementation? So what we need is a government that will put Nigeria, that will go to our foundation and rebuild the foundation. And then we start to put things one after the other. You cannot wake up one morning and the governor, the governor will say, oh, today is a bank holiday. We're going to do cleanup from 9 o'clock till 12 o'clock. What nonsense is that? You know? So if we want a clean society, we have to initiate, we have to build a structure that will make a granite seller, after selling, pack his things. You don't need to wait until last Saturday of the month. So we have to start putting this as part of our system. It's part of the government job, but then the people, we also need to decide to move, but we need leadership. We need people who follow. We need a leadership that will lead us to it. So it's not a fire service approach. I'm afraid that is what the country is trying to use.
Thank you, Barrister. So, Dr. Chris, we lost it. From all you're saying here, we've lost our status as the giant of Africa, though many people still believe we've never been. So why did we lose it, and how do we move forward? How do we regain it?
If you can remember when we talked last time, I said we have people running our countries that actually have no business to run anything, not to talk about a country as big as Nigeria. So these people, the more we try to manage the so-called democracy we have, the more we would find ourselves in a place, our children would not like. Like Enya said, we have to go back to the drawing board. And where is the drawing board? My own take is we have to go back to education. Our people have to be educated. Our people are not educated. And I'm not talking about education of getting into a classroom and writing an exam and passing an exam.
You're talking about of sensitization.
Sensitization is education. Everybody knows what their role in society is. If for some reason you cannot afford to go into a classroom, but then you are trained in such a way that you know your place in society and you know what society expects of you. But then we have a system where the government doesn't even know what is happening in Nigeria. So you have charlatans who are people educating Nigerians. And who are the people I call charlatans? These are people who have arrogated so much power in our religious bodies, in our meetings, people who will tell you this is how society is supposed to be. And then if government says anything, or if people who know what they are doing say anything, they will tell you, no, my pastor said, or my priest said. So you have chaos in the system. On the other hand, for some of us who know how to do some of these things, or who can help Nigeria, we don't actually challenge the status quo.
Yeah, we leave it for them.
I'll give you a typical example.
Yeah, we step back and say, yeah, let them, yeah.